Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. Your host, JP John Poz. Here we have a filmmaker, director, producer, the man behind Night School Films, the man behind Raven, the new documentary, Mr. Geordie Day. Geordie, welcome in. How you doing?
Good. How are you, John?
Very good. What's going on in your world? Tell us all about the Raven Nevermore doc.
Yeah, it's a documentary, obviously, on Raven, who I think is just a pivotal influence within wrestling history, sort of the thesis of the doc. And um, upon kind of learning about him and how he established the character, um, I just really became drawn to that story. I think Billy Corgan like kind of put it best, like when we interviewed him. Raven's just, he's an artist in the wrestling space. He I think fundamentally he created this character Raven, which was sort of an amalgamation of all his like childhood pain and trauma, and then he sort of started to actually become the character of Raven. So that just felt like fertile ground to create like an interesting kind of psychological documentary biopic, and I'm excited now that it's coming out.
Very, very cool that it's finally getting out there. I had a chance to watch it. Awesome stuff. I just love the ground that's covered because sometimes the documentaries are like, oh, they're not going to cover everything. You pretty much, I mean, right? It's, correct me if I'm wrong. You cover everything.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I made it for wrestling fans, so it's nice like to hear like when wrestling fans enjoyed it, appreciated it, and I think I agree. Like I think they do like especially the diehards are like, oh, like really appreciate that you included like the Portland years and you included like the Johnny Polo and the Scotty the Body stuff. But I just think in large part that just is like partly what makes the Raven story so interesting. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like
Yep.
how far Raven is from who Scott was when he invented him, is partly what makes the documentary so fascinating.
Yeah, that is true because if you think about it, like each step takes you closer to him putting it all together and creating Raven, if you will. I mean, it's like he had to go through Johnny Polo and Scotty Flamingo, Scotty the Body, all that other stuff to get to Raven.
Yeah, I just think that sort of speaks to it's like when you see an actor and you like kind of can't believe the way they've transformed themselves. Like when you see like Heath Ledger's like Joker kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
I think people would be really shocked to discover that Raven wasn't he didn't grow up like that. He didn't grow up like Kurt Cobain. He was a really good-looking jock who was a Marine and got lots of girls. And Raven wasn't a lie. That is who he is. He was drawing on something very real. But the fact that he was able to sort of like transform himself like that, um, in my opinion, kind of speaks to his genius. And it's like at the center is like what makes the doc so interesting.
So how did it all come together? Like when you're actually thinking about it and kind of like forming it and putting it all, how does it all line up for you?
Yeah, I was sort of thinking about um, I had done a documentary on Bob Probert, who's like a legendary hockey enforcer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for your hockey fans, and that doc had really did much better than I think anyone had like anticipated. Um, I think like in terms of distributors and streamers, they maybe like weren't able to appreciate like how big Bob Probert's fan base was. It's like kind of an interesting moment in hockey where like the hockey fighters were kind of all stars within the league, and him being kind of the heavyweight champ during that era just meant a lot to hockey fans, and they hadn't forgot it. And there's sort of this niche kind of fan base within the hockey fan base of hockey fight fans. They're kind of like wrestling fans. Like they trade tape hockey fights and collect hockey fights. And I was trying to think of like within the world of sports, like what other what other kind of like fan bases exist within fan bases. You know what I mean? And I kind of think in the wrestling space, ECW is like that. They're still like the diehard ECW fans. Like when the former ECW guys come out at the Indies, now they still chant ECW. Like people haven't forgot about it. And I was trying to think like, okay, like maybe that would work. I had like a couple other ideas kind of that might work. And then I heard Raven on Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast, and I was like, man, this guy really just has an incredible perspective on wrestling in the industry, and you could spend 2 hours with him talking about wrestling, and that would be really interesting to listen to. Like the podcast was certainly really interesting to listen to. Like he like, I think what I love about Raven, he views wrestling as high art. Like he doesn't separate wrestling from like he talks about wrestling like a Van Gogh painting. He treats it with that level of seriousness, which I love. You know, he likes three-dimensional characters and high-level storytelling. And I was like, okay, so he does have kind of a unique perspective on wrestling, and you kind of need that when you're doing like a documentary on someone. It's like not necessarily enough that like they have a really great story and they're really well known. To carry a biopic, they need to have a really great perspective. And so I reached out to him and I told him this, and I was like, yeah, I think that this would be a really good documentary. And I think he was a little skeptical at first. He's like, who is this guy? Like, why did he reach out to me? Like we had no like mutual connection or anything like that. But we started chatting on the phone, and he pretty quickly became interested, and we made the film.
When I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, we were talking about this. He really pumped you up. He said, about but he mentioned the Bob Probert thing.
Oh,
I think he
nice.
mentioned Charles Manson too. So he kind
Yeah.
of he did some research on you as you're doing research on him.
Yeah. Well, we just had a great time making the documentary, and it was a great partnership. I mean, I guess the doc filmmaker, you can only really do so much. The other person kind of has to be game, like in a biopic. Do you know what I mean? Like they have to be up for like a certain level of honesty and introspection, and he just totally was. And I've said this in a couple other interviews, but it's true. Like because in the documentary we kind of get into Raven's mental illness and like his history of sometimes being kind of a challenging person to work with, maybe in large part just because he's so passionate. But I was expecting like at some point like the other shoe to drop and him just become like a massive pain in the ass, and like I'm like, okay, that's probably gonna happen, and like that's okay. Like we'll just deal with it when it gets to that point. And it just never got to that point. He was always just like kind of cool and chill. And there were times where like we would disagree, where I'd be like, oh man, I don't get this note. Like no, 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 like it doesn't work that well in documentary to do that. And I would like I mean very often, if not every time, I mean, he had impeccable notes. I'd like try to be like, you know what, he's right. This is better. So it just was such a fun experience, and I really liked working with him.
Man, he didn't show the Raven side of himself. It sounds like he was kind of maybe Scott Levy-esque rather than Raven-esque.
Yeah, I think he's both. Like I think Raven is a part of him. Like that's what he says. It's an exaggerated, sort of dark part of him, and like kind of at a certain point, he had to go to therapy and figure out like, okay, like who is Scott Levy, who is Raven, and sort out like how much of Raven he truly is. And yeah, I think he had done that work by the time that we were working together.
I always used to talk to an old boss of his, Kevin Sullivan, who was the booker in WCW. He said he was like the biggest pain in the ass, not like in a mean way. He was just like always wanting changing this or doing that. Why don't we do it this way? That's just it's just the way he is. Maybe with authority or with a certain direction, he's always thinking like maybe we could change it.
You know what? But I get it. Like, cause I'm the same way. Like, I think like anyone that's like passionately creative, like you don't want to like do the easy thing that everyone else is doing. And I'm like in those situations all the time. We're like, dude, can't we just like if I'm like directing a commercial or like a corporate video, they're like, can't we just do what like is just gonna make everyone happy and is easy and is established? And you're like, yeah, but that's not fun. Like we should do it like like try and do something innovative, try and do something exciting. So like I totally relate to that, and I love that that attitude, and the fact that he was always like looking for like everything he did, within his wrestling career was interesting. Even the things that didn't go over were interesting. He was never looking to do something that had really been done before. So I just have so much respect for him as a creative and as an artist.
How long does it take you to put it together? Like when you started to when you finished it and working with him, like how much time did that actually take?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. So like it took a long time. But the thing about like documentary, or at least the way I make documentaries, is they're like, you always have like a bunch going kind of at once, and they're all kind of like part-time jobs, like that you're like kind of shifting between a few of them, because like it took maybe like a couple years to film, like maybe like 2 years to film, but it wasn't like I was filming for like 2 years straight. It was just kind of like, hey, like when like interesting things were happening, like he was at a like doing a promotion or a show, and we got some interesting access, or like there was some, and a lot of that stuff like didn't end up in the documentary, but like there were like for looking for those opportunities. And then like in terms of like getting like a lot of those like big name wrestlers, you kind of have to work around their schedules, so that took a little while to schedule and whatnot. And then probably took like another year just to like kind of write and edit and just like do a bunch of revisions. And then it was done for a while. Like it's been done for a while, like maybe even like a year and a half. It just took a while to like, you like entered into, you do like the whole film festival thing. And then like we toured it at different, like with different screenings and that kind of thing. And then like, so like now it's finally coming out. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that like I'm seeing like some pretty positive, like I'm seeing positive feedback from wrestling fans, and I'm really happy that they like it, because I have so much respect for wrestling fans. Like I think wrestling fans are some of the smartest sports fans. They really like there's like this misconception amongst a lot of people that don't understand wrestling or don't get wrestling. They're like, don't they understand that it's like all set up? And you're like, yeah, dude. Like they like wrestling fans get it. They're like some of the smartest like entertainment fans around. They really understand the business. They just have an appreciation for the art form.
100%. And it's almost like when somebody says like, oh, don't you know this is set up or this isn't real, but you almost like laugh, be like, well, you don't think that about reality TV and all these other shows that have writers, and you think this,
Yeah.
like you're the one being duped and tricked. Like we know what's going on. We know what, we know what, we're in on it, a little bit.
And it's like when you like at a certain point they just kind of had to kind of be open and on. Once you realize like what's actually going into it, it's almost, I'd argue it's like more impressive than if it were real. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like,
Yep.
or I don't like to use the word real and fake, because I agree, like it's sort of disrespectful to the wrestlers, but you know what I mean? Like it's when you see the amount of effort and genius that goes into putting that show on, and the athleticism, like I mean, of course, like I mean, you'd have to respect it. The more you learn about it, the more you learn about the behind the scenes, I think the more respect you have to have for the business. And it is super dangerous. I mean, like people have died wrestling, so calling it fake just feels disrespectful.
Definitely. These guys are breaking their necks and stuff. The
Yeah,
Kardashians aren't breaking their necks. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
these people are
exactly.
really
Yeah,
getting injured here. Yeah.
exactly.
That is crazy. That like the misconception, like, oh, that their fans aren't as smart, or like, you know what I mean? And it's like, come on, it's basically, they're like a sports fan, but they're very loyal to their team. They're very loyal to wrestling. I mean, it's the same thing to me.
Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, it's like it's such an interesting art form, and it's I've just always had such an appreciation for it. So
And
I
it's
just was
like,
so glad I got to do something within the wrestling space. Like I've always wanted to. So it's just so, it was such an exciting experience. And the other thing that was crazy was like especially ECW wrestlers. Like I grew up being so afraid of them because they seemed so crazy. Like I
yes,
started watching ECW really young, maybe I was like 7 or so, just because I grew up in a family that like really liked wrestling. And ECW was pretty adult. So like when you're like 7 years old and you're like watching people like, like I mean, it just felt so authentic. It felt so wild and like unplanned. And when people were doing like high spots, it felt like it just felt so scary, and you were scared for everyone's safety. And the wrestlers seemed so reckless and nuts. And so that, like, I didn't kind of realize that, but when I was doing this documentary and I was interviewing a lot of those guys, that kind of impression kind of stuck with me. And then like when I was like actually like interviewing Tommy Dreamer and some of these people, it was kind of surprising to me like how nice everybody was.
right.
I don't
It
know if
is.
you can relate to that at all, because you interview a lot of wrestlers. Like,
Yeah. But yeah, it's so
Yeah,
interesting. Like when you actually get to like Sandman and Dreamer, for instance, years ago, I'm like, I don't know, but these guys are like wacky, they're nuts, they're like goofy. You
yeah,
talk to him, totally normal. Sandman, he loves sports and gambling, and like normal, guy stuff and stuff, and he's like, doing construction, all this other stuff. Dreamer is like completely down to earth, joking him around with him about Curb Your Enthusiasm and Seinfeld and stuff. Like
yeah.
it's way different than you realize with some of those, especially the ECW guys who you think are just, oh, these guys must be nuts.
Yeah, like Tommy Dreamer is just the nicest guy. I mean, he's just like he's just a great family guy. Like he just wanted to talk about his kids, like like what the
Yeah.
cameras were off, tell me what his daughters were up to, and then like you see him like backstage with all the wrestlers and the way like he mentors. They're all like that was one thing that I was just really impressed with. It's just like because all the stories that I had heard were like shoot interviews of wrestlers like not maybe being nice to each other. But like what I witnessed was wrestlers being like so nice and supportive to each other. And I know like that's not always the case, but like all these like legendary wrestlers like Raven and Tommy Dreamer and like seeing them like kind of work with younger wrestlers, they were so patient and so generous and like so supportive of all the younger wrestlers. And I found that really moving and cool.
Yeah, that's a little bit different. Maybe the old school was more like
Yeah,
cutthroat, backstabbing
yeah,
politics, right?
yeah, I think that's probably true.
So when you're back there, is it like MLW? You at Impact? I mean, because there's a bunch of different, like in the documentary,
Yeah,
a bunch of different locations, if you will, different promotions.
yeah, they were both like I mean like Raven is very generous. Like I found because I followed him in a lot of promotions. He like always took the time to like give notes on matches and like and really pay attention to people's matches and really try and help the wrestlers. And at TNA, Tommy, like as I mentioned, like Tommy Dreamer was very much like that. Like you could tell he cared about the wrestlers beyond the product, like genuinely. Like it was a really good culture backstage there, from what I witnessed. Like I don't want to like overstep, but like what I saw, I was like really impressed by it.
Pretty cool to be able to get that footage too, because obviously
It was.
not all promotion can let you film back there and kind of show maybe some stuff that's behind the scenes or some stuff that you wouldn't expect to normally see, which is cool.
It was, yeah, and I think it was just it just speaks to like how much respect the industry has for Raven and what he's done.
When you're doing that, right, and obviously you're getting Dreamer, who's selecting the guys that you're going to interview? Are you picking them, or is he picking them? He's saying like this guy's a must, or this guy's a must, or we could get this guy, or as far as just getting the guest and the different interviewees.
It was just a conversation between me and Raven. So like I put together a list and I was like, hey, I think all these people would be good. Like, what do you think? And we kind of just like went back and forth and kind of came up with the list. We pretty much got everybody we wanted to get for the most part. There was a couple people. We didn't get Stevie Richards. He's just not interested in doing anything Raven related anymore. And which fair enough. And we weren't able to get Paul Heyman. I think just because of what he's up to with WWE. Like I don't think
Right.
he'd be allowed to do that. But for the most part, I mean, I'm just really happy with the wrestlers we were able to get. We have a lot of big names in this, and yeah, again, I think it just speaks to like how much respect they all have for Raven and what he's done for the business.
And if you just look at like as far as Ravens history, I mean, you're hitting all the high spots there. DDP was a huge part, obviously, not only in
Yeah,
the Raven character, but his friend and obviously feud in WCW. So that's a good one. Dreamer, same. I mean, you hit all the high spots, if you will, with like the good guys.
appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, and I mean they're all so good in the movie too.
Yes, I love that because when you can have a guy that can, basically one-liner it or like trailer it, you know what I mean? Like they hit that
Yeah,
line. DDP is like a perfect guy. Dreamer's a perfect guy. Sandman with like his quick wit, like those are the good guys to do because they'll hit the thing in the trailer. You're like, all right, now I got to see what the full interview of what they're going to say about Raven is. You know what I mean? It's just perfect.
yeah. I think like out of all like, because I've actually made quite a few documentaries, and I think out of like all the lineups of people like I've interviewed, the wrestlers are just like unbelievable at that, at giving you bites, which makes sense,
Yes.
right? Because
Yep.
it's essentially what they do professionally for so long. And then even like Billy Corgan's
Yes.
like a genius. Like he's obviously a genius, but just in like every way he's a genius. Like the way he's able to like talk and just create interesting bites and like his whole perspective. Yeah. I mean, it was really such an amazing experience to get to talk to some of these people. They're just like so brilliant in interviews.
Billy, it's another cool one, and like kind of threw me
Yeah.
off there. It started off like, oh, damn, Billy Corgan, here we go. This is great.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty cool.
When you're putting this all together, right, and you're editing and stuff, I'm actually was shocked because obviously I watched the whole thing, but I was like, wow, I didn't realize it was as long as it was. Because it just flows
Oh.
and it's very quick. But when you're putting the documentary, is that like the good length? Is that like the perfect length for when you're putting or what you want to put together?
Well, I appreciate that. I try to be conscious of making like a documentary like move. Like my background's like in TV, so like I'm always trying to like have a good pace. I think truth be told, they like in terms of commercially, they probably want you closer to an hour and a half, but it's just like tough with like an hour and a half to 2 hours, I think is considered reasonable for like a biopic. Like these days, I think sales agents want you to be closer to an hour and a half. So it's something we looked at, but it just felt like it was working at 2 hours. I appreciate you saying that. I think like the pace makes it feel like a fun movie to watch, and it doesn't like drag too bad at 2 hours. And there's just like so much to cover. He had such a extraordinary career, and like all the behind the scenes stuff is so crazy. And like hearing him talk about wrestling was so entertaining. When we were like, once we got like, I mean, the original was like 3 hours. Like once I got it down to like 2 hours, I was like, I think this is working. I think we can stay at this length. So I appreciate that you saying that.
Yeah, it kind of does fly by, but imagine if cutting it down. And I mean, this is Raven's career. You can't really cut it down.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? That's
it's
like
hard.
it's a
Yeah,
good length, right? It's hard to cut down some of that stuff.
appreciate that. Yeah, yeah, it's tough.
Because imagine like, oh, let's just take out the polo or something. It's like, no, it doesn't make sense. Like you got to keep that in there. You know what I mean? Like you got to keep stuff in there for Raven's career because it's so massive.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, as far as Raven, and I know you were saying before he was good. Any bad days with Raven? Because he could be a little bit of a malcontent sometimes, as they say. Any bad days with him? I know you said maybe some disagreements, but overall good with Raven.
Yeah, we didn't really have like anything major. It would be like more like creative stuff, but like I don't really take that stuff personally. Like if I disagreed with him, I'd like push back and be like, "No, it's cool," and then he'd be like, "No, dude, it's not working." Like it. So no, not really. Like I mean, even like when we did the main interview, like the circumstances were like pretty tough. We like filmed it in this like abandoned house in Atlanta that just looked really cool. And if you film in cool locations, it just goes a long way, like in terms of like the vibe of like a movie. It just makes it look cinematic, like especially if you don't have like a huge budget. They had like no air conditioning in there, so it was super hot. And so right up until filming, he's like, "Oh man, this is really tough," but then he like kills it because he's a pro.
Yep.
Um, and it was mostly like that. Like he was mostly pretty. He was most like he's pretty much game for like whatever, and like really put his best foot forward throughout the process. And like so, like it's like an example of like in a Talking Heads documentary, it's tough. You can have like rock songs in there, but it's tough to do. I mean, this might feel a little inside, but it's tough to do like rock songs as a score, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So for um, some audience members that are maybe listening to this that like aren't as big of a movie nerd as me, like when a movie, which is fair, when a movie is put together, there's a thing called a soundtrack and a score. So a soundtrack is like all the pop songs or like songs that have been licensed for the movie, and the score is like the instrumental like thing that accompanies the action, like the classical music that goes along and like kind of aids in the cinematic experience, if that makes sense. And so like initially we kind of had those like interludes of like punk rock or grunge kind of music in there with more classical score. which is a little bit more conventional for like a biopic, and especially for talking heads, that's sort of considered advisable within documentary because it's so much of people just sitting and talking, and you want to keep that energy. So a very like dynamic score that's doing all sorts of crazy things kind of like adds an energy to it. Whereas rock music is great, but it's like it's much more repetitive, so it's not as dynamic. So it's like it doesn't necessarily make the scene feel as dynamic. Typically, like this is in theory. But when he watched it with the kind of classical music, he's like, what are we doing?" I was like, it's a rock and roll character. Like it needs to feel like rock and roll. It needs like grunge kind of music. And I was like, no, like that won't work. And I was like, kind of pushing back. And he's like, no, it's got to be rock music. And I was like, okay, we'll try it. And then the rock music totally worked. And like it totally it actually added more energy to it. And so like from what I learned in like from past documentaries, I thought would apply to this, but he was totally right about that. And there's a ton of examples like that where he was right about his notes, and I kind of went in thinking I knew because I'd like done all these documentaries, but he just really understands um, storytelling, and so he had a lot of really good notes that really helped the film.
Yeah, he's pretty damn smart, even to
He's
the
really
music
smart,
and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, he's really like he's in tune, very in tune.
He's in tune. Yeah, he's smart. And a lot of the notes don't. Yeah, it's funny. Like hearing the wrestlers talk about like his notes. Like they've had similar experiences, but they're like, what? Like they don't like because he's an individual thinker, so they don't like. Sometimes the note just doesn't be like doesn't sound right. But then you try it and you're like, okay, yeah, he's right.
I remember talking to DDP a while ago, and he was saying like him and Raven were going back and forth, like, "No, that doesn't feel right. I don't want to use that this week." And then he's like, "What do you mean you want to use it this week? What are you talking about?" He's like, "No, we're gonna save that. We're gonna do this instead." Like he's always like
Yeah.
tweaking, if you will. Like, no, that's not right for here. Like he's putting his stamp on it, but the timing has to be right for him.
Yeah, and I think like I mean you have to. That probably sounds like relatively. I don't want to say like obvious, but like from an outside perspective, you're probably like, yeah, no, like that makes sense. Like, but like I think like you also have to appreciate like these guys were wrestling like every day, traveling every day. Like there's not like I mean it was just such a grind, and when you're in it, like I think it's really hard to be thinking in terms of long-term storytelling
Yep.
as the wrestler, as the performer. Like it's like you drive to a different city or you fly to a different city, then you work out, then you do laundry, then you go to the show, and you're in that routine like every single day. So to be like you're just trying to survive it, you want to be doing the best idea that you can come up with each and every day, and sort of like have that wherewithal to be thinking, a month down the line, months down the line, like thinking long-term story arcs, thinking about it like a creative. Um, that was a really like rare quality to have. Uh, so yeah, I mean, he's just just such an impressive guy. So just really excited to be able to give him those flowers for having that ability to do that. And I mean, of course, he's like partying and drinking through all that too.
Right. Yeah. Scoring girls and everything else. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
When he's being interviewed, obviously with that great decor in the background, like that house, that scary house, he brings out his phone. He starts reading stuff. Was that not that it was planned, if you will, but that almost seemed like it was very ad libbed or off the cuff, where he's like, you know what, I want to figure this out. Like, or did you guys kind of plan on him almost like self-diagnosing, if you will? Because that's a great scene. That's a great part that he does that.
That was great. That was my twin brother is in school to be like he's finishing his graduate's degree to be a couples therapist, and so he's the one that suggested it, which makes sense, right? Because he's got a psych degree, and he was like, oh, like in the would it be cool to have him read like the DCM? Like that would be like kind of like a like fun clip, and like
Yep.
and kind of knowing that like Raven's so good off the cuff. Like he's good when he's not bored and he's not going through the motions because he's just
Yep.
like such a smart guy. So like anything to get him um to make something fresh. So he's not just, repeating the same story he's had to repeat a million times. And I was like, oh yeah, good idea. And of course, yeah, you had that like great moment of him actually like reading all the traits of like how he got what he got diagnosed with.
Yes.
and he made it like a real fun thing.
That's great too, because it's almost like he's like that is me. That is true. Like a humorous moment too, like a little levity too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's got a great sense of humor about that stuff.
But it is also true. That's also the part too, which makes Raven Raven. He's like, well, yeah, he is kind of
Yeah,
neurotic. He is a narcissist. Like some of that stuff, is accurate, but it's so funny. He's poking fun at himself, and good self-deprecating humor.
yeah. Good self-deprecating humor, and like it's a yeah. That was perfect. That was a really good idea. That's you got to give credit to my brother Paul on that one.
When you're looking at Raven too, and he's figuring this out, like it actually probably helps him just mental health, like realizing what he has and kind of going forward. So it's actually kind of therapeutic.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I think sometimes the process of making a documentary could do that. I think he's done a lot of work in therapy to sort of sort out his issues, and I think he'd kind of landed on his feet a while ago. I don't think the doc really worked as therapy. I mean, you'd have to ask him. I think the doc was actually very, very challenging for him psychologically to like kind of have to revisit
Right.
those things. But he was in a place where he'd done the work, he'd come to terms with a lot of things. He has a much more at peace spirit these days, so he was able to do that. But it's an intense thing, and like I think that's important to recognize when you are doing a biopic on someone that it's hard for them. Like this is their real life, and like sometimes filmmakers can really take that for granted. And when you show someone like I mean, like you think about like story structure and like the story of a movie, and it's essentially like everything goes wrong and the character overcomes it. Do you know what I mean? Like there has to be those antagonistic forces.
Yep.
But when you show someone like 2 hours of like all of the shit that they've had to go through their entire life for like 100, like an hour and 40 minutes, and then it's only like the last 20 minutes is like them overcoming it because that's like how story sort of typically works. That's like a
Yep.
really intense experience. You know what I mean? It's like, here's your relationship with your parents that was like really tough, and here's like when you struggled to like come to terms with like the challenges within your career, and here's your drug addiction, and you're throwing that all at somebody in an hour. It's like, geez, like that's like a tough thing to put somebody through. And so I really appreciate that he was willing to do that, and he wanted to tell an honest story. And I appreciate, and he's been saying, he's hoping that people that can relate to him in terms of mental health issues can maybe find some resolve from the film and be like, okay, like I can relate to that. Maybe that's something that I need to get sorted out.
And the stuff with his dad too. I mean, that's like one of those
Yeah.
things where it's like, man, that stinks. Like he's not abusive or anything, but he kind of neglected him, and not kind of. He did neglect him, and he didn't never told me he loved him. I mean, like, stuff like that. It's like, man, that's kind of like really sad. Like when you think about it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can relate to that, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah. I was thinking about that. It's like, man, that's it sucks for him to kind of like have to relive that and talk about that again. But again, a lot of people can relate to the story and kind of be more relatable to Raven too. So it's kind of like a bittersweet kind of thing because you are probably helping a bunch of other people realize the same thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, poor Raven. When you look at some of that stuff, it's like, yeah, he kind of didn't even want him. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. It's like upsetting. Obviously, people are gonna have to delve into it more with the doc, but very very sad as far as just some of his personal troubles.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
And then even his wife, when we was talking about him, like he really shouldn't be taking bumps and stuff anymore. It's like us as a fan, we always think of like, oh, he's Raven, he's invincible. He took all those brutal headshots and this and that, all these
Yeah.
bumps. But it's like, man, he can't be taking bumps anymore either.
Yeah. I think fortunately for him, he's kind of like, like in terms of like what he's been doing like in MLW, and he's done some stuff in NWA too, like because he can play that like psychological, like he's got a psychological hold on like a group of people, kind of like cult leader
Yep.
kind of character so well. I think that kind of gives him an avenue to still be involved in the show without having to take super gnarly bumps and still be able to wrestle. So Um, I'm happy for him in that regard that he's his like mind's still intact and he's still able to do that. But like I mean, like wrestling takes a toll. And you just look at it like they just wrestled every day for years and years and years, and like it's just so physically damaging to your body. Um, yeah, it catches up with you at a certain point.
For sure. And I was even thinking too, he did a bunch of those screenings, so he's reliving all this stuff a bunch of times because he did those Q&As and he would do those screenings, which was really cool. He did a bunch in Philly, Baltimore, one in New Jersey. So he's reliving it over and over and over again. He's seen the doc a million times here, Raven.
Yeah, I was listening to him too, like he did Kevin Nash's, but he's done a bunch of the podcasts he's been doing lately. They have been really great. He's just so good at that kind of thing. He was on Kevin Nash's podcast, and they were talking about, like he's like, yeah, I think a lot of us wrestlers have like a PTSD from like all those bumps. And I hadn't really, um, like we don't talk about that a ton in the documentary, but I thought that was like a really interesting way to phrase it. So like, you know, it makes a lot of sense, but a lot of those like violent matches, I think, like stick with you, not just in terms of like the physical injury, but like the psychological impact on that too.
Yeah, that is kind of like an interesting thing because I mean, how much pain are they
Yeah,
in? And you kind of have to mask it and to go to the next town, and you can't say you're hurt because you might not get paid, or you might get depushed, or they might pull you off TV, or you might not get the title, which is more pay. I mean, there's like a million reasons why you kind of have to basically pretend you're not hurt, and then go out
yeah,
there and sell that you are hurt, and then pretend when you're in the back you're not hurt again.
exactly. Yeah.
It's just absolutely crazy. So, as far as this coming out, where could everybody like? Where did you kind of send it out? I know obviously Amazon, but where else is the doc available?
So the doc's available on Amazon Prime now, but it's going to be available on a bunch of other VOD channels as well. You'll be able to get it on Vudu and Google Play, um, and a few others. Like I think you'll be able to rent it on YouTube, iTunes, all that. And that'll be later, like sometime between now and Christmas. I think it's the 21st. Um, and then at a certain point, it'll be available like on a streamer like Tubi or something like that. But that'll be later on.
Was that a pain getting it into all these different platforms and stuff, or is that kind of par for
No,
the course?
that's the distributor's job. So uh, that's they got to do that. It's a pain.
Gotcha.
It's not. It's really not a pain.
So obviously, Raven, the Nevermore, the Raven Effect documentary, just it's such a great doc, and obviously everybody should go out and see it. But give us a push of why you think everybody would enjoy it, just as far as just wrestling fans even would go out and should see it, want to see it.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I appreciate giving the opportunity to do that. I think, yeah, as like I mentioned, it just really comes down to, I think, Raven's unique perspective on the wrestling business. I think Billy Corgan puts it best in the documentary. Raven's an artist in a very brutal business. And I know, there's a lot of wrestling documentaries. It's That's not new, but I guarantee you haven't seen somebody talk about wrestling and somebody that has a story like wrestling like Raven. Um, he is just so smart to the business, and I know wrestling fans are very smart to the business. And so I think this is a uniquely smart perspective on the wrestling business. And so I know if you're a wrestling fan, you will really appreciate that.
And the thing is, too, Raven is it's so interesting that I feel like wrestling fans, you won't be able to like kind of put your finger on it like with him. He's like I don't know. He's out there, but he's a genius. It's one of those things. He's like one of those guys where you have to just watch it just for how intriguing he is. I just love him because he can go from one spectrum to the other spectrum, but he's still when you look at it like man, this guy might be the smartest guy in the room type of guy. You know what I mean? You get that vibe from him.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And it's fun. I think it's a fun movie. It's not like all just like dissecting wrestling. Like I think the scenes are really smart and funny, and like like all the behind the scenes stories of the craziness that they were up to at ECW, the party stories, the wrestling stories, like what was going on between all those angles and how they happened. I think I think there's a lot of fresh original stuff in there. So I think it's a fun movie. Hopefully, if you're a wrestling fan, you dig it. If you're into wrestling psychology, if you're into, ECW and what ECW did and the whole Attitude Era, how crazy all that was, I think you're gonna like the movie.
And I love with the Raven and Dreamer stuff. They go into some, behind the scenes stuff. Super smart. And Raven is the one like kind of orchestrating. He's like, no, this is the way to do it. And
Yeah,
obviously that's like super smart of him just to be like, wait a second, hold on here. Like, I know this crowd is bloodthirsty and all this other, but this is the direction we need to go and need to do it. Like, he's so smart with wrestling psychology. It's ridiculous.
yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I agree. Yeah, I think wrestling fans will dig that stuff too.
So as you hit the wind down here, head towards the finish, give us all the plugs for you. Like what else you have done, Night School Films, everything,
Sure.
Geordie.
Uh, well, as I mentioned, I did Tough Guy, the Bob Probert story. That's on Amazon Prime as well, amongst a bunch of other places. Um, and I mean, I've done like a bunch of documentaries, like a bunch of stuff for CBC and everything else. And in more recent years, I've done a lot of stuff within like the Indigenous space. I'm in Canada, so a lot of documentaries on like Indigenous land rights that I've done with Ricochet Media, Indigenews, and The Real News. And a lot of those documentaries can be found on YouTube. They're done with a journalist named Brandy Marin, and I think those are some pretty solid docs as well.
Charles
And
Manson
yeah.
things out there is pretty cool
Oh yeah,
too.
the Charles
Yeah.
Manson thing. I wasn't the director on that, but I produced the documentary called Charles Manson Final Words, where we interviewed Charles Manson for the last year of his life from prison, and I believe that's on Amazon Prime as well. At least it used to be. And that's kind of a cool documentary as well. We talked to a lot of former family members and just like kind of re-examined there's sort of like a conventional narrative that Bugliosi kind of came out with, in Helter Skelter, but you have to like appreciate the fact that he was the prosecutor in the case, so it's a bit of a biased perspective. It's like it's his theory as to what the motives of the murder were. But when we talked to a lot of the former family members, when we talked to Charles Manson, a different narrative came into play, and so it's just a different perspective. I think the true and honest perspective in terms of like what actually happened. So that's a cool doc too, and yeah, people should check that one out as well.
Night School Films, you got a lot of good stuff going on, and obviously the Raven documentary is at the top of the list. But where can everybody find and follow Night School and find and follow you as far as all your social media?
Oh, appreciate that. I'm Night School _films on Instagram, and I'm Geordie at Geordie Day on Twitter. You can follow me there.
All right. Awesome stuff. Geordie, thank you so much for all the time. Everybody needs to go out there and find the Raven doc on Amazon Prime ASAP. So thank you so much for all the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.